Why hello there! If you're interested in building a low-profile deck patio like this out of 2x4s, keep on watching. Let's get started.
The deck patio that we're building can be placed in a plethora of different locations because it's a freestanding deck, but on this application, we're going to be placing it right on top of this concrete patio. The first step is to take an overall dimensional measurement of this patio, and it's approximately 21 feet by 14 feet.
On this project, we have approximately 6 inches to the top of our concrete step. That means we have a very low profile, which is why tough blocks come into play perfectly, because we can actually set our 2x4s right on top of this and level out this entire patio quickly and easily with a structurally sound member like this. So now let's get to lumber.
For any deck-related framing project, you're going to want to go with pressure-treated lumber. And on this project, because it's such a low profile, we have to go with 2x4s. The vast majority of these 2x4s are 14 feet long, and I'm burning 3 inches for the 14-footers because of the 2 rim joists on either side, which will give me a perfect 14-foot length. Since the rim joist has a 21-foot span, I divide and conquer that space, which means I'm cutting a 10-foot 6-inch length at the very front of our deck. Once I have these 3 boards in the correct position, I then grab my tape measure and start laying out our joists. Because we're using 2x4s and installing composite material, I always suggest going 12 inches on center, and in this application, that's exactly what we're doing. I place our 12-inch on center mark on both sides, and once that's taken care of, it's time to start cutting all of our 2x4s down to size. And because we're burning 3 inches, each one of these 2x4s is 13 feet 9 inches. One thing to consider, especially if you're doing this project by yourself, is that these 2x4s are a lot easier to move around by yourself than 2x12s that I installed on my previous deck project. Speaking of my last deck project, it was actually the first time I used a battery-operated framing nailer, and it was a dream to use. It was so much nicer to have that on hand versus carrying around a large air compressor and making sure you have enough hose for the entire project. When it comes to nailing, because this is an exterior project, I'm using galvanized 3-inch long nails. I'm placing 2 nails at every location on the top and bottom, and that will give me plenty of structural support for this entire run. Because this is a freestanding deck, I'm going to be nailing off the opposite side just as I did previously. In all honesty, if I did this again, I would most likely lay out all of my tough blocks first, and then place my 2x4s right on top of the tough blocks. That would have actually made life a little bit easier in the long run, but on this application, this is exactly how I did it, and it works out just fine. Just keep that in mind when you're laying out all of your tough blocks on your project. As far as layout goes, I'm centering each one of these footings approximately 8 inches from both ends, then placing one tough block in the dead center of our patio. Now this really did feel nice and stiff, but later on in the video you will see that I'm placing a 4th row of tough blocks because I actually looked into the spacing requirements for the tough blocks, and they suggest that the max span between tough blocks is 59 inches, or if you're on the metric system, 1500 millimeters. I scooted out our deck patio in order to nail off the second side properly, and if you don't want to do this and you want to keep them in place, you can always use some joist hangers instead of pulling it out, but keep in mind that this is a lot quicker and much less expensive. Once I had that side fully nailed off, I then scooted our patio back into position, realigned all of our tough blocks, and moved on to the next section. As I noted earlier, because our front rim joist is 21 feet long, I had to cut it in half, so I did cut another 2x4 at 10 feet 6 inch and secured them together with a scrap piece of pressure-treated lumber. The remainder of the deck would be installed the same exact way as we did previously if we didn't have these concrete steps. So if you're wondering why we're going over this concrete patio, it's mainly because this young family has 2 very young children, and it's become a worrisome tripping hazard for these 2 young kids. And if you want a perfect transition from your slider to your deck, this is a perfect way of going about it. At this point in time, I wanted to say a huge and special thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, Tough Block by Build Tough. I've actually used these on a number of different projects, whether it was the foundation for an amazing greenhouse, a walkway, and so forth. There's so many opportunities to use this amazing foundation system. Not only is it extremely lightweight and easy to maneuver around, but you're never going to be able to get this type of a low profile with a standard cement foundation block. Each one of these blocks is designed to hold up to 1,700 pounds, and the fact that I didn't have to handle or pour any concrete footings whatsoever is truly remarkable when I've built a lot of decks. If you want 20% off your next order, please check out the link in the description box below and type in the promo code BYOT. With any deck project that I take on, one of the most important things before you get to the actual decking portion is to make sure that your deck is properly square. In order to do that, we have to take the cross-dimensional measurement and make sure that the measurement from corner to corner is the same length on both sides. I drilled a screw in on two sides and then took the cross-dimensional measurement. There was about a ½ inch of difference, which is why I gave it a couple love taps, maneuvered it into position, and it was a perfect 25 feet on the inside corner of our last joist. I did have a mark where I was measuring that 25-foot mark, but I didn't have this last piece installed just in case I needed to maneuver that deck one way or the other. Now that I know I have everything properly lined up, I nail off that last joist and move on to our doubled up joist. On your deck patio project, you certainly don't have to do this step, but we want as beautiful of a finished look as possible, and a picture frame deck is always extremely eye appealing in my perspective. In order to still utilize our tough blocks, we do have to cut off a couple of the side channels. These ribs are not normally advised to cut off, but there's no way to actually fit these on without making room for these doubled up joists, and with a multi-tool, it makes it extremely easy and quick work to do. There are 4 rib sections that you have to remove with the multi-tool, but you still want to make sure that there's a cohesive vertical piece on all 4 corners so it allows for proper support and alignment. I do the same exact thing to 4 tough blocks, lay them out appropriately, and then place our doubled up 2x4s right into the channel. It is a very nice snug fit, so I do have to give it a few love taps to get it into position, but as you can see, it fits in quite nicely. I make a mark at 5 inches, and that's because we have fascia board going over the side, and the fascia board is only ½ inch thick, so I do have to burn a ½ inch on our deck boards, which are 5½ inches wide. I do the same exact process to the opposite side, and I will show you how I attached a deck board to a concrete step. A little bit tricky, but I figured out a very nice, easy way to do it. With any deck project, you do want to provide blocking, especially on 2x4 material, because 2x4 is going to be more likely to bow or bend than your general 2x6, 2x8s, 2x10s, or 2x12s. Since the vast majority of our joists are 12 inches on center, that means that the vast majority of our blocking is going to be 10½ inches long. Cutting one and then just tracing that mark every single block makes it very quick and easy, but you can also use a table saw, which will also make life very easy and straightforward to do if you have a set measurement for so many blocks. Just be careful with kickback, because that can definitely get out of hand very quick and easy. With the help of a chalk line, I made it extremely easy and straightforward to figure out where the dead center of each piece of blocking needs to be. This is also an extremely nice implementation piece with these tough blocks because they're designed to have blocking like this, so leveling out each piece of blocking was extremely easy and straightforward. Each side of the blocking is placed into a channel of the tough block, and I secure one side down with 2 nails, and on the other side I top nail it in place. You can throw a few diagonal nails if you don't like to top nail, but in this application a top nail worked just fine. This was a lot of blocking, but it wasn't too time consuming, especially with the fact that we want to guarantee that we have a properly structurally built framework for our deck. If you do decide to go with a picture frame look, you will have to have a few smaller pieces of blocking, and in these applications you might actually decide to use a few screws. It's very easy to get a few screws diagonally placed if you don't want to top nail your blocking, but as you can see, you can top nail, it's just more prone to blowing out. On your project, if you are trying to frame around concrete, just make sure you have as much framework as possible, because the more framework you have around your steps, the easier it's going to be to install the decking later. In this application, I had to use shims, but just make sure if you have to use shims on your project that they're composite shims so you don't have to worry about them rotting over time. Plus, composite shims are just as easy to cut with a multi-tool that normal wood shims are. And I had to get a little creative in a couple locations, such as this one, where I had to try and get as much blocking in as I possibly could. This is a freestanding deck, meaning that it's not attached to the house at all, but I did want to provide a bit more support and strength for this awkward, unique area around the steps, which is why I'm going to insert a few concrete anchors at these locations. These are specifically called concrete wedge anchors, and I have to pre-drill my hole first with a hammer drill and then hammer the anchor into the hole while taking a crescent wrench and tightening down the nut as much as I possibly can. If you've never used these types of anchors before, just know that they're extremely strong and perfect for this type of application. The only problem is that now that I have everything fully laid out and looking beautiful, I need to grind down some concrete. Yep, these concrete steps are angled downward, and there's close to an inch thick of concrete at the very top of these steps that needs to be grounded down. This was very difficult to do and extremely time consuming. So time consuming, in fact, that I actually went to the store and bought a brand new, very large 15 amp grinder. This thing holds a massive 7.5-inch diamond wheel, and it did speed up the process compared to our 4.5-inch diamond wheel. I don't know how much effort this saved me because this still took forever, but we were able to get it done. If you ever have to grind down concrete in this type of fashion or any other type of application, make sure you're taking care of yourself and the people around you, because I have a dust shield connected to a shop vac sucking up all the particulates at least as much as possible. I also have a respirator on, ear protection, eye protection, and gloves, so that's quite a bit of protection you have to account for if you're doing this type of work. The final step we need to do before we get to decking is the tape. This is Pro Tac Tape by TimberTech, and this actually extends the longevity of your framework underneath your deck. This was never an issue in past decades because the lumber underneath your decking was always going to last longer than the actual deck boards, but now that everything's composite these days, then the deck is actually lasting longer than your joists underneath, and this tape will actually help prevent rot and make sure that your pressure-treated lumber underneath your deck lasts as long as humanly possible. This tape comes in multiple widths to choose from depending on the type of application that you need it for, and it's actually a very quick, simple process. I just need to make sure that the top of every single board has this applied to it, even the blocking. Plus, this type of tape really doesn't add a tremendous amount of cost to the overall cost of the project, and it's a really nice way to protect all the hard work that you just put in. And with that said, we are done with the framing portion of this entire project. I am thinking about making architectural plans for this build, so if you would like to see those, let me know in the comment section, as well as the size that you would like to see. In my next video, I'm going to be installing a beautiful TimberTech decking material, but till then, I still think this is truly one beautiful, sexy beast of a deck patio. Framing, of course. Oh yeah,